poetry can't stop tanks. Obviously, it can't bring about an actual change on the streets, but yes, it can help to sensitize the readers and make them aware of what's happening. Poetry can respond to these things and it does sensitize the readers. I believe in that.
What was the inspiration behind creating this book, Nissim Ezekiel, Poet and Father, a Centennial Celebration?
The Nissim Ezekiel book came about because his daughter, Kavita Ezekiel Mendonça, wanted to pay a tribute. Nisim was born in 1924, and 2024 marked 100 years of his birth. And his daughter wanted to do something very special to mark the centennial year of his birth.
There are figures like Jeev Patel, Jeet Thail, Menka Shivdasani. What were some of the most striking insights that they shared about Nisim?
You come to know about how the next generation of poets was kind of nurtured by Nissim Ezekiel. He was very generous with his mentorship. He looked at everybody's work with deep rigor, but he never monetized his gift. He asked nothing in return. I've been writing about ecology and environment, the deterioration that Earth is facing, whether it's direct or indirect, is felt far more by women.
Hi, in today's episode, I'm delighted to have with me Vinita Agrawal, a friend, and who's authored 6 books of poetry. We are not talking 1, 2, 3, we are talking 6 books of poetry. Books edited by her include 2 anthologies on climate change, the Centennial volume on Nissim Ezekiel, poet and father, and one of the Kashmiri poet Ghulam Rasul Nazki. She is the recipient of the Jayanta Mahapatra National Award for Literature 2024, the Proverse Prize Hong Kong 2021, the Rabindranath Tagore Literary Prize 2018, and Gayatri Gamarsh Memorial Award for Literary Excellence USA 2015. She won a special mention in the Hawkers Prize 2019. Her work was shortlisted for the inaugural Dipankar Khiwani Memorial Prize 2021. I'm almost losing breath there with so much of accolades. She also co edits the yearbook series of Indian poetry in English. She was former poetry editor with Usawa Literary Review. Her work has been widely published and anthologized. She is on the advisory board of the Tagore Literary Prize. She was one of the 20 poets to be featured in a documentary on Asian poets titled Deepest Uprising Made in Taiwan. And she's a birder and a photographer. And she's a friend. Thank you so much, Vinita, for taking out the time today. Today, we're going to talk about your book, Nissim Ezekiel, Poet and Father, a Centennial Celebration, 1924 to 2024. So, Vinita, to begin with, can you tell us what was the inspiration behind creating this book, Nissim Ezekiel, Poet and Father, a Centennial Celebration? What prompted you to write this?
Hello, Mohua. Such an honor to be here and to be talking to you on your podcast. Thank you for inviting me. So the Nissim Ezekiel book came about because his daughter, Kavita Ezekiel Mendonça, wanted to pay a tribute. Nissim was born in 1924, and
Yeah.
2024 marked 100 years of his birth. And his daughter wanted to do something very special to mark the centennial year of his birth. So she put together this volume. She wrote a memoir, uh, about her father and about her family life, her childhood, and she also reached out to a whole bunch of contributors to for them to share their memories of when they had met Nisim and how they knew him and how they remembered him, their memories of him. And then she wrote me a mail one day asking me if I would like to edit the book. And I'd been a huge fan of Nizim since school days. I
Me
remembered
too.
his poem, Night of the Scorpion, studied it in class 8. And I just jumped at the chance because I'd never met Nisim in person. And this, I thought, was the closest I could get to knowing the man and a poet I hugely admired. So that's how the book came about.
So, how did you approach this very delicate task, of weaving together such a diverse collection of voices in this book? It isn't easy to put them all together.
Absolutely not, indeed. But the credit goes entirely to his daughter Kavita because she was the one who knew, the people that Nisim had met and who would have memories to share of him. And also, she took the trouble to reach out to them and gathered all these interviews, and she gave me a fully compiled manuscript. So all I really did was, in terms of editing the book, was gain a perspective on what the book had to throw out, and also write an introduction to put the entire memoir into perspective, so to speak. That's how really the credit goes to her. This is her baby.
Oh, that is so sweet of you, Vinita. Of course, the credit is to you too. And let's talk a little bit about his daughter, Kavita, that you just now mentioned about. So she has significantly also contributed to this whole book, and she
Yeah,
has shared her perspective on her father.
yeah.
Was there any moment of contrast that you felt with your writing and her perspectives that you added in the book?
Yeah, absolutely. Kavita's sharing of her memories with her father goes down to her early childhood, and she exposes her vulnerabilities and the trauma that she endured. And the way she has shared whatever she has in the book is vastly different than what I or any of the other contributors have sort of expressed. Because Kavita's parents separated when she was very young, and they had, the parents, that is Nissim Ezekiel and his wife, they had three children, Kavita being the eldest. And one fine day, her mother decided that one child needed to stay with the father. So she was bundled into a taxi with a suitcase in her hand, and she was sent off to live with her father and the father's mother, which is her grandmother. And you can imagine it must have been so traumatic having no say in the matter, not being asked whether she was ready to be separated from her siblings and her mother. And she just went to her father's place, lived there, and of course she shared a very deep bond with him, and she adored her father, and there was this great relationship that they shared. But those kind of things which come out from her memoir are completely very deeply moving and very different from what the others have shared.
My God, can't even imagine that. You're so right when you say that,
Absolutely.
children don't have a say in the
Absolutely.
choice of place that they will live. So the
Indeed.
book touches on many facets of Nisim's life, including his poetry, his role as a mentor, and his family persona. So what aspect of Nisim's life did you find most compelling, as you worked towards this collection? Maybe a few anecdotes from his personal life that you could share for our listeners and our viewers.
Yeah, sure. So, out of all the roles that Nissim Ezekiel has been shown playing in this book, in this memoir, in this patrimony, for me, certainly Nissim the poet stands out above all else. And he is a role model. He's a very distinguished poet. He's a poet of international renown, and everybody looks up to him as a poet. So the fact that we learn so much about the way he wrote his poems and his prose and his craft, the way he wrote his, I mean, the craft that he exhibits in his work is stands out above every other aspect of Nissim Ezekiel for me personally. And regarding the anecdotes, I would say there's one. Nissim Ezekiel used to look after the Penn Center in Mumbai, and he would be a mentor to everybody who approached him. And Kavita would go there to have lunch. She was a young child. She would go there to have lunch with him there. And she would patiently wait near the door for everybody to finish their work with Nissim Ezekiel. And then she writes very movingly that she waited at the door for an entry into his heart. You know, this just goes to show that the father never put his children above all the others, young students and poets who had approached him, and he treated everybody equally. There was no special treatment or special guidance given to his children, even if Kavita was interested in writing poetry. And another anecdote I remember she mentions in the book is he gave all his money, even the Sahitya Academy Award that he won, he gave it away to charitable organizations and for philanthropic causes, and he was very generous that way. And I remember once in the book it mentions that if he says that if I didn't have a family to support, I would probably give all my money away for philanthropy. He's a very generous man that way.
So there are several renowned poets, right? So there are figures like Jeev Patel, Jeet Thail, Menka Shivdasani.
Yeah.
So, who have also contributed to the book. So what were some of the most striking insights that they shared about Nissim?
Oh, yes, it's very interesting to read all their contributions because you come to know about how the next generation of poets was kind of nurtured by Nissim Ezekiel. Like Jeev Patel writes, he met him as a very young college boy, maybe 18 or 19 years old. And apparently, Nissim Ezekiel was not very impressed with the poems that Jeev had brought to him. But he did say that I'd be very interested in looking at the next batch of poems that you write. So, although there was this sense of critiquing his work, but there was also an encouragement that keep writing and I'll be happy to look at your other work. And Jeev says in his contribution, he says, no one should be turned away empty-handed when one is approached. Like that's what Nizim used to believe in, that nobody should return empty-handed. And Menka Shivdasani has a very interesting thing to share. She says she took her poems to him and he looked at them and just tossed them on the table and said that poetry can't be read unless it's typewritten. So type out your poems and bring them to me. And she thought it was an outright rejection of her work, but that was not true because he asked her for her number and her name. And when she didn't contact him again, he made sure to call her and invite her to share the next batch of poems that she'd written. And also, she tells us that, we always associate Nissim Ezekiel with Night of the Scorpion, his most famous, perhaps, poem. But he personally hated it because he says, everybody thinks that's all I've written. So I don't want to look at it anymore. So Jeet's contribution is very moving. It's full of admiration and appreciation of Nissim Ezekiel. He calls him a small island of serenity. And he also says that it was Nissim Ezekiel, when he perfected his craft and brought out his poems, he was actually, in a way, nurturing the next generation of poems because everybody had a lot to learn from it.
Wonderful. So the memoir also highlights Nisim as a mentor, right? So what did you learn about his approach to teaching and mentoring young poets, through his stories shared by the contributors? Was there anything that you felt, really touched you or really shook you, could you share that with us?
Sure. In fact, there's something I'd like to read out from Jeet Thayil's
Please
contribution.
do.
Yeah. Um, he says Ezekiel was a role model for many writers. Not only did he write knowledgeably about art, literature, and theatre, he had held jobs in journalism and advertising. I asked him how he moved between poetry and prose with such apparent ease. I wanted to know how he managed to protect his poetry, although he wrote so much prose, on deadline to make a living. His reply was simplicity itself. He never worked very hard on prose, he said. He just let it write itself. Of course, reading some of his art criticism and essays, this is difficult to believe. They are as well crafted as his poems. Then he said the words I took with me from that afternoon, words I will carry with me still. I only ever worked hard on a poem, he said, which is such a lasting thing to say.
Beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's
So,
really, really beautiful.
and he was very generous with his mentorship. He looked at everybody's work with deep rigor, but he never monetized his gift. He asked nothing in return, and he was very generous with his time, very kind, very approachable, and this is what he wanted to do. And also, he was a poet, as we all know, but his philosophy was to live his life as a poet, which is something most people are not able to do. He was okay living in poverty or in deprivation, but he wanted to live his life as a poet.
Wonderful. That's such a loaded thing you just now said, Vinita, that living your life as a poet, it requires tremendous courage.
That's right.
It isn't easy, in a world where everything needs to be monetized. And it's really like an era that's passed us by.
Yeah.
Vinita, let's just talk a little bit about your book, Eartha, which is, have I got the name right?
Yes.
Eartha? Yeah.
Yeah.
Eartha is a reflection of your journey as a woman navigating, a world where environmental destruction is really real. And so, could you tell us a little bit about your book, Eartha, and what inspired you to write it? As a woman, I would really like to know your perspective.
Yes. So I feel as if I'm traveling multiverses, pun intended, when I graduate from Nissim Ezekiel to Eartha. This is the book. Um, so Eartha has been a long time in coming. I've been writing about ecology and environment, and Eartha is a collection of 55 poems of eco poetry, actually, dedicated entirely to the earth and to climate change and the challenges. So, as a woman, the burden of the deterioration that Earth is facing, whether it's direct or indirect, is felt far more by women than by uh, any other gender or any other community, I would say. So I felt this very deeply, and I wanted to write. People ask me if Eartha is the Indianized Hindi Eartha, or is it Earth? I said it is Earth, although I wish it was also the word meaning in Hindi. So Eartha was it took a long time in coming, but I was very happy to put together something dedicated to Earth.
Wonderful. So, do you envision the role of poetry in raising awareness and inspiring change in the face of such a it's a monumental crisis. I was just talking to somebody and to some friends a few days back, and I said I can't get over the landfill that had passed by, in Delhi. And
Yeah,
I was on my way to the Jindal Law School, and it was dystopian. And from a distance, I did not know that this sort of a landfill is there beyond the beauty of Rashtrapati Bhavan and Connaught Place and the rest of it.
yeah.
So being a poet myself, do you think really poetry can bring about change, Vinita?
That's a very good question, actually. And I'd like to share with you an experiment conducted by Dorothy Rettelai at the Denver School of Music many, many years ago, when uh, she spoke to plants, and one set of plants was spoken very positively to, and she said very nice things to those plants. And there was another batch of plants that was spoken very negatively to, and she abused them and all that. And then this was this remarkable difference in the plants that had been spoken positively to, and they flourished and they bloomed. Yeah. So the point that I'm trying to spark here is that if plants can respond to some sort of stimuli of words, then surely human beings, which are far more they process emotions far better than plants. I'm sure they can also feel the impact of poetry, and if a poem carries with it a pertinent message of healing for the earth, I'm sure human beings will respond. And very famous poets like Seamus Heaney from Ireland, he used to say that poetry can't stop tanks. Obviously, it can't bring about an actual change on the streets, but yes, it can help to sensitize the readers and make them aware of what's happening. And you mentioned this terrible landfill that you passed by in Delhi, and there are hundreds of them. There's so many in Bombay, and it's just terrible the way the earth is being exploited. Poetry can respond to these things and it does sensitize the readers. I believe in that.
Me too, completely, Absolutely, yeah. My only way of responding, to calamity around me is through words. So we're all
Yeah.
on the same page there. So could you share a little bit about any of your upcoming books or projects that you're working on and what readers can expect from you?
Well, as a poet, one is always writing and doing something or the other. But as of now, I think I have put together a manuscript for my next book. So, very existential work, lots of questions and endings and no solutions, but yes, lots of expositions in that manuscript. So let's hope I'm able to put it together well.
Absolutely, you will. Would you like to read one of your poems from Eartha?
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay. So there's this poem titled Forgive Me, Amor. Amor is a kind of a leopard that's soon going to go extinct. And this is a plea for forgiveness that we couldn't save this animal from going extinct. They call you the Amur leopard, I call you the disappearing one, solitary like a yogi, nimble and strong, hunting like an arrow, jumping over ravines like the wind, fast as lightning, but not fast enough. You couldn't get away from us. I cannot meet your aqua gaze without feeling like a criminal. You're about to join the 900 species we've lost, humanity's worst crime. There's noise about saving you, conservation efforts, money pouring in, some good hearted activists. Only the deer can save you. More forests, more habitat, more terrain, more deer. We don't have more deer, more terrain, more habitat, more forests. I'll carry your torch in my heart. This yearning to not let you go is my bed of nails. Extinction is blood on my hands, the tremor in my bones as I draw my next breath. Forgive me, Amor.
Oh my God.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Vinita, for being on today's podcast.
Thank
And
you,
I look
Mohua.
forward to meeting you again soon in person. And
Absolutely.
congratulations. Yes, thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.